Huh. Okay, 14 years in Congress, UN Ambassador, Secretary of Energy, Governor of New Mexico, negotiated with dictators in Iraq, North Korea, Cuba, Zaire, Nigeria, Yugoslavia, Kenya, got a ceasefire in Darfur, nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize 4 times. So, what makes you think you can be president?
I'm Bill Richardson, and I approve this message.
Tell me what you did as governor of New Mexico.
Well, I used tax cuts to help create
Over 80,000 jobs. Yeah, I saw that.
A lot of those jobs
are in high tech, helps the middle class.
Up to 6th in the nation for job growth.
Balanced 5 budgets, put over $600 million into classrooms, and cut school bureaucracy.
New Mexico was 46 in teacher pay. Now we're 29.
For what we're looking for, you might be a little overqualified.
I'm Bill Richardson, and I approve this message.
I'm going to let you go to the next one. Or you can... Hi, everybody. I'm Elliot Schrage, Vice President here at Google for Communications and Public Affairs. I'm delighted, as part of our series of bringing elected officials and authors to Google, to introduce our guest today, Governor Bill Richardson. I think we already know that he's way ahead of the game in terms of a sense of humor, in terms of the political commercials that he's put out. I want to take a couple minutes just to describe what we're going to do. We're going to have a conversation. I'm going to ask questions. I'm substituting for Eric Schmidt, our CEO, who unfortunately wasn't able to be here. He's not in town today. I'm going to ask questions for probably 20 minutes or half an hour, including questions that have been sent in from various Google offices around the country. And then we're going to open it up for another half hour or so to questions from this audience. Because we are being video cast to offices near and far, and because, as is our custom, we're going to put a videotape of this event up on YouTube, I'd ask everyone to go to the microphone to ask their questions, and feel free to ask questions on any topic near and dear to your heart. Based on the conversations and questions we've had in the past, I have no doubt that we're going to run the gamut of issues that a candidate might face. I'm actually very interested in really just beginning by learning a little bit more about your sense of how your experience relates to this presidential campaign in this particular season, because you have an experience both in domestic politics but also internationally.
Well, the reason for the ad was, at the time, I was below the margin of error. And now we're moving. We're not yet at double digits, but the emphasis on the ad was this. This was the message. I'm not a rock star. I don't have gobbles of money or Googles of money. Is that pretty funny? But I've got experience. I've done it. In other words, one of the messages that I try to convey through the ad and in the campaign at a time when the media has already sort of picked 3 as the top tier and they cover their every move. And although I'm moving, I'm not saying this as a complaint, is that, the election of the next president should be about who can bring this country together, because we're deeply divided. War in Iraq, immigration, energy policy, apart from whether you're a Democrat or Republican, that we're a nation adrift with internationally enormously low standings, a war in Iraq that is a disaster, energy policy that doesn't exist. But also, I'm a different kind of Democrat. I'm a pro-growth Democrat. So what I'm trying to say is, I've been a governor. I'm a CEO. I've balanced budgets. I've helped kids be insured under 5. We've improved schools. We've become the clean energy state, although your governor disputes that pretty vehemently. But also internationally, the main challenges that affect the country I've negotiated with foreign countries. I was just in North Korea a month ago. I think we made progress on their dismantling their nuclear weapons, but we also got the remains of 6 American soldiers back from the Korean War, 16-year-old kids, 45 years ago. I've negotiated with a lot of dictators around the world, Syria, North Korea, Kuwait, Iraq. I was in President Clinton's administration as UN ambassador and Secretary of Energy, and he used to say, bad people like Richardson, we'll send them. Anyway, so what I'm trying to do is a message of competence, bipartisanship, actually doing something in terms of resolving problems, and that's what I'm trying to convey. And sometimes you also have to use a little humor, because I think these political ads, and I've been in politics a long time. I was in the Congress too. I hardly ever use negative ads. And I think politicians take themselves too seriously. So a little humor, a little humanity. I also make fun about my weight, which is a constant, I'm not the only one, that constant problem. But at the same time convey that, there's a vision behind the resume, that we need somebody that can bring a country that is deeply divided, but also can fix problems. I mean, we got a lot of problems in this country. And probably the biggest are international.
So it's a perfect transition. So you have, in terms of a resume, in terms of a body of experience, a tremendous amount of exposure to international diplomacy, to working collaboratively with other governments. And I'd like to talk about, or I'd like to hear your thoughts of, given where we are today in Iraq, what should be the role of the international community, the United Nations, body where you are our ambassador, in addressing the situation there and moving towards some kind of resolution?
Well, I believe I have the clearest position on Iraq, and my solutions are international. In fact, if there's one message in our foreign policies, we've forgotten an essential word. It's called diplomacy. It's called mediation. It's called negotiation. Our foreign policy today is preemption and military, and then maybe we'll talk about diplomacy. And that has damaged our image internationally, not just in Iraq, but in Latin America and Africa and Asia and the third world. I was just seeing here in your map who is Googling. Nothing's happening in Africa. There were maybe 2. Nothing's happening in Latin America that much. Some in Asia. North Korea, where I just came from, not one. My point is that globalization has not affected in a positive way the whole world. Now, Iraq, this is what I would do. And I've been there. I negotiated face-to-face with Saddam Hussein. I got a couple of prisoners back from there. It's in my book, Between Worlds, Putnam 2895. No, just kidding. That's supposed to be
Probably available on Google Book Search, but that's another issue.
But
right. Hey, look, if you get your plug-in, I have to get
all right.
ours.
Well, this is what I would do with Iraq. I would get out this calendar year. Out. And I have no plan for residual forces. 0, because I believe our troops have become the targets. And this is a disaster. And other candidates will come to you and tell you, well, you fulfill this benchmark, We get out this calendar year. If I were president today, obviously you've got to get the military to tell you how this is going to work. But I would also say to the Congress, and I served in Congress 15 years, be decisive. Get votes that deauthorize the war. Today you'll read about the House and Senate had different versions, cut off funds after 3 months, benchmark this. This war was 6 years ago justified on weapons of mass destruction. There aren't any. The American people want a change of course. They want a withdrawal. So I would have the Congress deauthorize the war based on the War Powers Resolution that says it's the constitutional authority of the Congress to declare war. Now, what I would do is not just leave. You got to have diplomacy. You have to leave a structure behind. I would use the leverage of the withdrawal, the leverage to conduct what I'm kind of known for, diplomacy. Get the 3 religious groups in Iraq, the Sunni, the Shia, the Kurds. They hate each other. This is not going to be easy. To come up with a coalition government, divide up the entity into three areas, divide Iraq into three, not states, but three entities, divide oil power, have a coalition government, divide energy ministries and all the other cabinet ministries, and then come up with a structure, a political compromise where everybody gets a piece. Now, you have to enforce that structure. I would have an all-Muslim peacekeeping force, the Saudis, Turkey, Jordan, and I would invite Iran and Syria. I think our foreign policy has neglected talking to bad people. In fact, I once had a conversation with President Bush, and I said, well, why don't you talk to Iran and Syria? You just talked to North Korea and you got something. You talk to them directly. They want to talk directly. They don't want to talk through China. And he said, well, I'm not going to talk to a nation that exhibits bad behavior. He said that to me. And I said, well, pretty soon we're only going to be talking to the Vatican. And that's not, so I would bring Iran and Syria. They would be difficult. That wouldn't be easy. But I believe every country is interested in stability on their borders. Now, what else? Why is Iraq so important? Our obsession with Iraq has cost us real foreign policy interests affecting this country. In other words, to forget about the real threats to us. It's not necessarily Iraq. It's threats of international terrorism, which are real. It's nuclear proliferation, a loose nuclear weapon that is purchased by a rogue country or comes across the border, a loose nuclear material, uranium, plutonium, tribal and ethnic conflict, but also, I believe, a big national security issue is global warming. It's serious. Greenhouse gas emissions. The planet is saying to us, hey, Earth, stop. Stop this man-made pollution, this overuse of fossil fuels. So not only is the policy flawed, but it's cost us real efforts to define what our main interests in foreign policy are. North Korea, Iran, Syria, issues relating to the Middle East peace process, globalization, poverty. I'd have a foreign policy that said, Darfur is important. Why don't we care about Africa? Well, we always care about Iraq and Europe. Why don't we care about 4 million people in Darfur that have lost their homes and women that have been raped and 300,000 people that have killed each other in a war over oil and political power? Why don't we care? Because it's Africa?
Is that another place where diplomacy will make a difference? I know that you were there and you were able to arrange a ceasefire for 30 days. Is that a place where diplomacy, or perhaps, much as we might not like it, the threat of force or the presence of military forces might make a difference to enhance the power of diplomacy?
It's called American leadership. It's called having a foreign policy where you don't just care about what is most strategic, or are we going to protect our oil interests, or are we going to protect our economic interests? It's also thinking that if you build international support for your goals, which are noble, such as reducing greenhouse gas emissions or stopping genocide. I mean, that's an objective.
Would you send troops to Darfur?
I would first use diplomacy. I would then use sanctions. And I got a ceasefire in 60 days. Now the ceasefire is over. And the reason, you're saying, well, he's governor of New Mexico. What the hell's he doing in Darfur? You know why? I won't tell. No, I'll tell you. The Save Darfur Coalition asked me to go because I'd gotten a reporter out of Darfur 6 months earlier because I knew the leader of the Sudan. Parade magazine said the world's worst dictator. And I sat down like this. And I had his wife. He's a reporter, Chicago Tribune. He'd won the Pulitzer. Am I talking too much?
It's fine. I do have a couple of questions, but this is fine.
All right.
They're more interested in you. Right.
So, and I remember telling his spouse, I said, we're going to meet this guy who's considered the worst dictator of the world. And I know him, but we want to get your husband released. All right? I said, we got to get him released. And I'm going to make a pitch, and we don't have too many cards, but I have one goal for you. This is the spouse. When I go like this, I want you to start crying. Humanitarian.
He's
when
giving
you
all
don't
of his
have any
diplomatic
cards.
secrets to us here.
And so I went like this. She was a professional woman, like all of you here. And so she had difficulty, but she did do all right. I said, Mr. President, look, you're not going to get much. consoled his wife, you're going to get one day of press, good press, because this guy is a Pulitzer Prize winning reporter and is reporting about genocide in your country, which is taking place. Let him go. And he said, what do I get out of it? I said, you're going to get one day of press. All right, I'll let him go. But there's one condition. I said, what's that? He says, you stay. I said, wait a minute. We connected. He was kidding, of course, thank God. But, so we got it done. And then we talked the ceasefire, and, it's very shaky. We helped a little bit.
But you talk about leadership. Is this something an American president should do as the leader of America? Is it something that we need to do in collaboration with others? What's your sense of, again, the role of the UN? Kofi Annan, was he a successful?
He was good. He had a little accounting problem. I mean, he was not, the UN, it's a good place because it's a forum for the third world, and the fact that you have an immediate opportunity to discuss a world crisis. And it's good that everybody's to get there. But it's really China, Russia, the US, Britain, and France. They're the 5 permanent members that call all the shots. And the world has changed. There are other major players that should be part of the Security Council. India, a Latin American country, probably Mexico or Brazil. Another Asian country, as I said, India, an African country, South Africa, Nigeria. The UN needs to find better ways to monitor itself. It's inefficient, a lot of pork there, but it's a good international institution, and we can use it to advance our goals.
Should we have troops? Should we be willing to have our troops led by
No,
UN
because they are
leadership?
targets. What we should have is a permanent UN force that countries contribute to. The U.S. shouldn't necessarily be excluded, but there are issues relating to U.S. command, but they can be resolved. It should involve not just Muslim troops, because it's usually troops that don't have the funds and use it as balance of payments. We should expand the Security Council. But, should a president intervene? Yeah. I mean, does that mean he goes and negotiates directly with Bashir? Yeah. Why not? Do it for NATO. Do it for Iraq. I do it with Iran. I do it with Syria if it helps the country, if it protects our people, if it has a measurable goal. You don't in a negotiation, you don't just do it to say you're talking. And talking to somebody is not a concession. You can deliver a tough message. You can convey American intentions. But to exclude countries and say, we're not going to talk to you, you're not important, you behave bad, that hurts a lot of our goals. Now, here's one area, you haven't asked me, that involves American leadership. You know what? On energy. We need to become energy independent. We need to find ways to reduce global warming. It's going to take an Apollo plan. It's going to take an American president saying, this is a crash program, we're going to do it in 10 years. Having our dependence on foreign oil is not worth it. It hurts us. 65% imported oil. And what I would ask every one of you is that it's got to be a crash program that reduces our dependence from 65% to 10% in 10 years, and it's going to be solar, wind, biomass, fuel cells, distributed generation.
So would you support?
It means going green.
Carbon tax?
No. You know why? Because a mandated cap and trade program is more effective. A carbon tax is passed on to consumers. If you mandate and say that by year 2050, we're going to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 90%, that is far more effective than a carbon tax. Plus, I don't like taxes. I don't like to tax people. I am a believer. I'm a pro-growth Democrat, an entrepreneurial Democrat, innovation. Look at my state. It used to be last in per capita. We've rebuilt our state by giving technology companies 3 years of no taxes if you come into New Mexico. We will give you a tax credit if you pay over the prevailing wage. We've attracted movies and aviation and renewable energy companies by co-investing with those entities. I'd have a new economic policy in this country. Sorry,
No, it's okay. So You mentioned, so cap and trade is the approach you'd take for that. What incentives would you give for individual consumers? What role could each of us as citizens play?
I would say to you, I'm going to ask you to sacrifice. I'm going to ask you to be more energy efficient in the way you live. I'm not going to say you got to wear a sweater all the time and turn the heat down, but I'm going to say I would like you as Americans to realize that this is a national problem. You know, there's no sense of community in this country. It's everyone for themselves. I would say, you know, if you just every day think of something green that you might do, that you might be more efficient in lighting and air conditioning and washing machines. I see you got your laundry here.
Part of the tour.
Good.
Part of the tour.
That's good. I would find ways where I would say to you, and I would give Google, I'd give you a tax incentive if you went green. If you had solar roofs, if you had, I would, because I think this has to be a national transformation. And it's not mandates. But look, one of these days, what are you paying for gas? Close to $4. What if Iraq and Iran and Venezuela get mad at us and say, we're going to choke America off? I mean, you don't want to have this dependence. And so reducing the fossil fuel dependence that we have, which is like an addiction, but with real concrete action. Not just a little energy bill in the Congress, but massive tax credits, subsidies, government money, yes. Entrepreneurial investment in renewable technology, yes. Because you're going to create jobs. You're going to create high-wage jobs. When you retrofit homes and have solar roofs in homes, that's going to be jobs for working people.
One of the things that's related that you mentioned is the idea that new technologies can help address some of these problems, in particularly in the energy field. A lot of the people in this room are people who have strong personal as well as professional interests in building and developing new technologies. What concerns do you have, and what role would a Richardson administration play in promoting education, engineering, keeping people here who might come from other countries to develop their entrepreneurial skills and build their businesses?
Well, I'm a border governor, but I believe that immigration, we're a nation of immigrants. You know, I'm Hispanic. My Richardson name doesn't help, but ¿quieren hablar español? No, just kidding. But you have no Hispanics here, do you? Oh, maybe. Of
course we do.
All right, you and me.
Right.
But
you actually lived outside the United States for much of it.
I did. I was born in California. I lived in Mexico. Mother is Mexican. My mother still doesn't believe I'm a governor. She's 92. And I said, well, I'm running for president. He said, president of what? Technology.
Education and
Look,
engineering in particular.
I think that's the second biggest issue. The biggest issue is the war in Iraq. The second one for me is education. You know, I'll try to deal with science and engineering, and I'll give you my speech about that. But you know, I think our high school curriculums are outdated. They're non-competitive. They need to involve not just more science and math, but also languages, and they need to involve the arts, because that'll spur creativity in our people. I look at scores of high school graduates. China and India are scoring a lot higher than we are. They're producing more engineers, and I worry, because that's competitiveness. What would I do about that? Well, I would start out, I'd offer preschool to every American. Preschool, that's under 4. I think you got to start early. You make it voluntary, but it's based on whoever wants to take it. I'd have full-day kindergarten. We don't have that in this country. I would create science and math academies, 250 around the country, take the kids and young people that might fulfill the greatest potential to become future engineers, and I would give them special training and priority. I would also, as I said, revise the high school curriculum. I would change our high schools so that instead of spending 65% as they do now, or 60% on administration and bureaucracy, think of your high school and how much the state contributed. 60% of that money goes to more staff, administration. I'd put it into learning, advanced placement, teacher training. I think we pay our teachers terrible. I'd have a minimum wage for teachers, but I would have accountability standards, licensure standards. If you're going to get more money, we did this in New Mexico. We went from 49 to 29 in teacher salaries, but they have to pass strict accountability standards.
But does the federal government, can the federal government do those kinds of things?
Yes, yes it can. I would also set a national goal. I'm big on big goals. We don't think big anymore. Now you all weren't born, but my hero was John F. Kennedy. He said we're going to go to the moon in 10 years, and we did. He also said that you got to give to your country. You can't just do things for yourself. I would ask you to do both. I wouldn't ask you to go to the moon, but we have a spaceport in New Mexico, by the way, commercial space. If you want to go on that, it'll cost you $200,000. We did that with Richard Branson. And I was laughed at because we invested, the state, $200 million in that. But I believe in space. I believe in science. I think there are a lot of answers there that, you know, we instead we spend it on, well, don't get me started.
I want to go to some of the questions that we received this earlier today from people in the remote offices, and if people want to ask questions, they can start lining up at the microphone. One of the questions that we got from one of the remote offices was about fiscal responsibility, and it said, as president, what would you do to rein in significant government overspending?
All right, well, I'm a governor, okay? So you're going to have all these candidates from the Senate. You know, they'll talk to you about balancing the budget. And I think you ought to be a little skeptical, all right? I have to balance budgets or I'm impeached. I have balanced 5 budgets. I run a state. So I believe it's critically important. It's also important for economic growth. This is what I would do. I'd have a constitutional amendment to balance a budget. Obviously, you don't do it in a time of recession or war, but I would do that. I would stage it. I'd have a line item veto as president. Any porky projects, you know, that a president thinks are porky, out. I would also have what is called pay-as-you-go policies. We had them in the Clinton years. If you're going to start a new program or cut a tax, you find a way to pay for it. Corporate welfare, you know, take away the tax benefits to countries that if you put a plant overseas, you now get a tax incentive. Now, you know, I'm pro-industry, as I said, pro-tax cuts, but I'd get rid of that. There's tons and tons in corporate welfare. I would redirect priorities. I think we can our defense budget, I think it can come down. I've never met a defense contractor that felt that, I never met, this is my only partisan comment. No, I won't. I think there are a lot of defense systems that are not worthy of continuing. I'd increase the number of people in our Army and our Marines, but you know, weapon systems, outdated systems. This is a war against terrorism. You know, our nuclear weapons, I mean, my state, Los Alamos, you guys here, California, I mean, we don't need a modern new nuclear weapon. We should reduce our nuclear weapons and negotiate and find a way to have international regime that deals with it. What else would I do? I'd make some tough choices. I'd say, you young people, here are your 3 biggest threats. And even though I know a lot of you are very successful, I shouldn't say that, but here are the 3 threats to the younger generation. 1, global climate change. That's huge for you. You better vote for politicians that have plans on that. Number 2, the deficit. I mean, your domestic priority, what's important to you, there may not be money left. 3rd is Social Security and Medicare, which you want to be interested in that because someday it's going to affect you. And if you read the latest report from the trustees, both funds are in jeopardy. You know what the answer there is? Bipartisanship. You got to find a way that on certain issues, national security, Social Security, dealing with the deficit, you have to have Republicans and Democrats fix the problem. Otherwise, it won't get done.
One other question from here. It's only appropriate that we ask. What do you use the internet for the most?
BlackBerry. I'm a BlackBerry addict. So that I don't have to talk to my staff, you know, I use the...
Okay.
Because you know what happened.
You know about Google Maps, but wait a sec. So let's. I don't know. Please, yeah. Any more or any other?
Well, no. I have my computer. I have. The good news about my campaign is that close to 20% of my funds have come online. So there's people out there that I like bloggers. I like the use of the internet. And by the way, I think you guys should be very careful. I would be for what is called internet neutrality. You should not go to bed with phone companies and others that want to take you over, all right? And be careful about that. You should stay free. You should stay unfiltered. And there's threats there. In fact, it's called the Congress.
We'll follow up. Actually, I have a couple of other questions on how you can be our government relations advisor. But a question here.
Yeah, so the reason I found out about your presidency is because actually I was on a humor mailing list, and somebody sent out and said there's a really funny political ad. And so I watched the first one. I thought it was kind of funny, and I kind of liked the guy. And I liked it, so I clicked on a couple more. And after watching 3 to 4, I thought, okay, this is good. I like him. Maybe I'd vote for him. Maybe I'd support him. And I couldn't tell if you were a Republican or a Democrat. And I went back to the answers like, no, he's anti-tax, he's small government. You know, you talked about the line item veto. Clearly, he's a Republican. But then it turns out you're not. And I should couch this because I don't want to come as an insult. I'm a Republican saying this. Why are you not a Republican?
Well, let me answer it in a nice way in the hopes that I can I can get your vote. You know, I'm independent. I'm a Westerner. You know, I rail sometimes against some of my friends in the Congress in Washington. You know, a political process that has become dysfunctional, and there's a lack of civility. I just like to get things done. You know, cutting taxes worked for me in New Mexico, but we paid for them, and we targeted them. And I believe this country is based on economic growth. And I don't mind renewable energy companies or you guys in Google if you do something good to make money. That's okay with me. Now, you know, I'm big on investing in people and healthcare and education. You know, I guess you can call me a big spender there. But my main message to you is I'm bipartisan. You know, governors, look at Schwarzenegger. Although, you know, he's a Republican. He's been a good governor. He and I get along well. You know, we go a couple of rounds, and that's supposed to be funny. But we both have, you know, we both have collaborated on clean energy initiatives in the West. So I just believe you got to be bipartisan. You can't just. There is no democratic solution to the war. There is no democratic solution on the environment. You know, the greatest environmental successes have been bipartisan. Our national parks. On immigration, you know, you got to be bipartisan if you're going to have a bill. Comprehensive immigration. You know, I'd secure the border, but I'd also increase HB1 visas, which allow a lot of workers that we don't have. I'd also have a legalization program for the 12 million that are here. What are you going to do? Deport them? You know, what makes no sense. So let's find a way for an earned legalization. And that, so if there's any message to you, is I try to be bipartisan.
Next question.
So my question is on North Korea. So I should preface this by saying that my opinion of the policy over the past 6 years has been that it's been a very reactive one, which is to say that North Korea will rattle its saber and then Condoleezza Rice will say, well, we won't speak with them, and then finally they'll send you over. But my question is, would it be possible to have something longer term? Can we actually build a policy for North Korea? And if so, what would that be, rather than just diplomacy, right? Diplomacy is more of a logistics of it,
Right.
but what should the policy be?
The policy should be something like this. And they've kind of, this is not original for me, but both administrations, Republican and Democrat, have thought something like this might work, okay? North Korea. In exchange for North Korea dismantling its nuclear weapons, maybe they have 6, and committing with proper oversight not to build any new ones, destroying their uranium plutonium facilities. North Korea, you do this. And that's North Korea's big card. In exchange, this is what we will do. We being the US, China, South Korea, Japan, Russia. It's called the 6 party countries that have been negotiating. This is what we do for you, North Korea. 1, we sign an armistice agreement, which basically means we won't attack you. North Korea is kind of interested in that, you know, so that's one. And in addition to that, here's the poorest nation on earth. We'll give you food, we'll give you energy assistance, we'll lift sanctions. Your economy is a total disaster. We will try to encourage investment and bring you out of not the 18th century, like the 13th century. That is a framework where I believe, you're not loving each other. You're not, going to celebrate the end of the Korean War together, but you're at least living in some kind of stability. That's, I believe, what we should strive for, and that's what I would strive for. Next question.
Hi, Governor Richardson. In your introduction, you said, I believe, quote, I'm not like other Democrats, I'm a pro-growth Democrat. Do you really think it's fair to characterize other Democrats as being anti-growth? And do you see any downsides to buying into what I would argue is that right-wing frame?
I've been criticized for saying that. No, I don't mean that they're not pro-growth. What I mean is sometimes we're a party, and this has been in the past, that has said, okay, this is how we're going to resolve this problem. We're going to tax, and we're going to talk about class warfare. I'm not into that. And I just believe, and I was attacked. One of the other candidates said, well, Governor Richardson's health care plan, and I believe that my health care plan involves not taxing people. I think we got to fix the existing plan. And that other candidate said, anybody that tells you that we don't need to tax for national health care will sell you a Brooklyn Bridge. So I felt, okay, so I'm being attacked for this. You want to have a ceasefire on this? Fine. So what I'm saying is that too often we have lost that mantle of being, call us the Atari Democrats, the pro-growth Democrats, Bill Bradley, Al Gore for a bit. And if you look at the traditional solutions on so many of our problems, our national posture at conventions, it's not as pro-growth as I want it to be. So, don't take it wrong, but if you do, that's where I stand. I'm not gonna agree to every party orthodoxy. I'm not in this race to get a ribbon from the Democratic National Committee. I'm in there to change this country and to try to make it better and to, sponsor good debate. I don't think I'm going to get him, but anyway.
Yeah, but you may get him.
Okay.
All right.
So first, if I may, I'd like to reserve the right for a brief but friendly follow-up. So Governor Richardson, I
have to warn
I
you.
appreciate your time taking to visit here, and I believe in choice, so I will give you the choice of 3 topics for your question. Do you want a question on immigration, healthcare, or science?
Whatever you want.
Healthcare? Okay. So your healthcare plan attempts to provide universal healthcare for all citizens through federal programs, access to pooled health plans, tax credits, and employer coverage. It does not mention, however, non-citizens and possibly the homeless. How will those last 2 groups receive coverage, and how will those costs be paid for under your plan?
All right, well, here's another thing that I like to say. You ask these questions. I've done it. I give health care to the homeless. I give health care to immigrants. I give licenses to immigrants, driver's licenses. I give scholarships to immigrants in my state. You know why? Because I want to bring them out of the shadows. Maybe it won't get me many votes here in California, but I believe that bringing individuals out of the shadows, giving them opportunity. If you want to be perverse on driver's licenses, 1, traffic fatalities reduce. Number 2, insurance, those that get licenses, at least they purchase insurance. If you want to be perverse, if you want to know where they are, at least you know where they are, right? And so our experiment in giving driver's licenses has worked. So that's what I would do. Now, I would also do other things. 1, on immigration. 1, I would tighten the borders. I certainly would. Double the number of Border Patrol agents. More technology at the border. I wouldn't do this stupid wall, which doesn't work, which is a terrible symbol of the country, which the Congress wouldn't fund. I'd have a legalization plan. I would say if you're employers and you knowingly hire illegal workers, you're going to get fined. I'd also talk to Mexico. I know the president of Mexico. I was raised there. I'd say, hey, you got to do something on your side to reduce the flow. You're giving maps to people, telling them the easiest place to go. You have a frank talk. It's called diplomacy. I would increase the legal immigration quotas. I got to live with this. Right now, 2 hours ago, I talked to the governor of Chihuahua. It's on my border. There's violence on my border. It's drugs. It's killing. People are killing each other. And that's because there's illegal traffic of people, and that breeds illegal activity like drugs. I will protect my constituents, and that's what I'm doing.
So I just want to understand that I understood your answer with respect to healthcare. So basically you're saying that would be paid for by the state, but it'd be recaptured by savings? Or am I misunderstanding
You want to hear my national health care? It's going to take 5 minutes. You want to hear it?
Yeah. Okay.
This is what I would do. Okay. We're all paying for the uninsured. There are 47 million uninsured, okay? We spend $2.2 trillion on health care every year. Everybody. That's the budget. There is 31% of that health care budget is administrative costs. It's inefficiencies. There's no health information network. Technology, what you guys do, connecting patients and doctors. So it's like pork in a system that it's not direct care. So here are my principles on a national health care plan. 1, no new bureaucracies. 2, if you have a health care plan and you're satisfied with it, I'm not going to mess with you. That's number 2. Number 3, everybody has to pay under my plan. It's like the Massachusetts plan. It's like the California plan where there's a share. The employer, the employee, the federal government, and the state. And that would cover that undocumented worker because everybody would have to get health care. What else would I do? I would focus on cost and coverage and prevention. Let me deal with briefly some issues that involve cost and coverage. 1, I would permit everybody to buy into the congressional plan, which is the Cadillac of all plans. Allow you to purchase coverage there. Number 2, I would permit on Medicare, I would lower that to 55 and over. No, this is not a big worry of yours, but ask your parents. It's 65 today. That would cover more people. Number 3, I would have a grand bargain. This is what we do in states. We handle Medicaid. I would say from now on, the federal government handles Medicare, and that is seniors and the disabled, and the states handle what are called the SCHIP programs, programs for kids and families. I would also say if you're a veteran today, to get veterans health care, your parents or somebody you know that's enlisted, they got to go to a veterans hospital to get health care. I would give them a hero's card for having served, and they can get health care anywhere they want, across the street from a doctor, which a hospital they can't do. I would have a refundable tax credit. You mentioned that, but this would be money in advance for companies and people that would also can't afford health care but would get this tax credit. I would also have the concept of everybody pays. I would also say we got to focus on prevention because everyone says, oh, we got to prevent. You know what I did in New Mexico? I banned junk food in schools. It's helping. I would do that nationally. I would have healthy lifestyles, promote healthy breakfast for kids. I'd promote mandatory phys ed. I would say to Google, and I don't know if they do this, I'll give you a tax incentive if you allow all your employees to work out, have gyms, go home and exercise, to have healthier lifestyles. But I would give you an incentive.
We're already there.
All right, but most of the country.
Our nutritionist may end up running for president. I don't know.
But most of the country doesn't do it. I would focus more on stem cell research, on cancer research, on biomedical research. We should be a country that tries to discover. I would find ways too to deal with Alzheimer's and diabetes. Here's an example. 33% of Medicare costs is diabetes. It's obesity. We have no efforts to try to prevent them. So my point is that I would have universal coverage. I think we can do it, but we have to have a massive effort to redirect that 31% into direct care and take these other steps. And you know what? You need a bipartisan solution. You got to get the other side to buy into what you're doing. If you think that other Democrats have a plan, and I liked Senator Clinton. I was a Democratic whip at the time she unveiled her plan. But it was too complicated to explain. I had to get votes for it, and I didn't understand it. So you got to put it in simple terms. And hers was, I think, a good plan then.
You should go, if you don't
Can
mind.
I just do the brief follow-up?
I think we're running out of time. Can we go
Okay.
to the next question? Thanks.
One thing first, just to get on the record, the reason we laughed when you suggested that we put solar panels on the roofs, we sort of already did that.
Here at Google?
Yes.
Well, good for you, but the whole country doesn't.
And true, but anyway, as for my question, let's assume that, hypothetical, that you're allowed to pick the next president of the United States. They have to, of course, be over 35, native-born U.S. citizen, and you can't pick yourself, any member of your family, or anyone who has ever run for president or vice president. Who would you pick and why?
You mean as a
You just get to appoint the president.
does it have to be a human being that exists today? No, I'm asking.
I'll accept appointing one of our data centers.
What do you say?
I didn't get it.
You know, you know who, and actually, the politician is going to come out in me, okay? Lee Iacocca, apparently my staff handed me a piece of paper, was on a national show. You guys know who he is. You are that aware, aren't you? He said that I was the most qualified candidate. And, you know, bless his heart. Anyway, I think we need somebody that, you know, here are the characteristics. One, you got to know foreign policy. You got to have values. You got to have business sense. You have to manage. You have to get things done. You got to have, I believe, a vision of the nation's productivity. You have to have run something. But most importantly, you have to have the ability to inspire. You know, I think I hear more people saying, you know, I want to be inspired. I'm ready to help in some of these solutions, whether it's renewable energy, energy independence, or global climate change, or, you know, let's stop this division on immigration. So those are the characteristics. You know, maybe Iacocca fits all of those.
Thank you.
You talked about Darfur. What about the rest of Africa? Even where there's not genocide, things aren't exactly great. Would you do anything different about third world poverty, AIDS? Would you maybe increase the foreign aid budget or change policy?
Yeah, I would increase the foreign aid budget. I don't see how we can afford not to. It would be aimed also at reducing the hatred that exists towards us in the Muslim world. I'd have a real education plan there. But with Africa, yeah. You know, I spent a lot of time as UN ambassador in Africa. You know how many tribal and ethnic conflicts are going on there? Wars? No. It's about 6. Is the world reporting about them? No. It's Africa. Here's what I would do. I would have a focus on world poverty. What I would do is, instead of present policies, World Bank, IMF, is, oh, let's build this country big roads, big dams. What I would do is I'd focus on education, nutrition, renewable energy technology. I think that is huge. Exchanges in that area. I would focus on refugees. Most of the nation of Africa, 1/4 are refugees. What is it, 29% have AIDS, 28%? I mean, these are fundamental issues that involve American leadership. I would also, you know why Bono is so popular? Because he says, don't have international economic policies that focus on nations to create debt. You know, let's find ways that there's freer trade and freer access of materials. You know what else I would do? I would bring broadband. I would bring the internet to Africa. I think it's pretty pathetic that Africa and Latin America have no broadband access. Is it because these countries are not creative? You know why? It's because they have no capital. It's because their leaders are not saying, hey, you know, we're going to have broadband in every village. So I would use our technology, what you're doing here. I would use you. I would ask you, I said, now, Google, you know what I want you to do? I want you to go to Africa and set up broadband access here. And I'm not going to mandate you doing it, but you know what? I may give you a tax incentive to do it. And if not, you're doing the right thing, so you're helping.
Thanks.
I should say, I feel like I'm obliged to say after all these, it's fascinating to hear sort of your prescriptions, because an amazing number of those are projects that are already percolating up, either in terms of the programs and benefits we offer Googlers who work here, or the programs that people who work here devote time to, either as part of their job or as their so-called 20% time, sort of free time where they're encouraged to think think big thoughts and come up with big projects. So there are a lot of people here, I don't know if they're in the audience, who are very interested in working on expanding internet access to people in Africa. And they don't even have a tax incentive yet, so imagine.
So this isn't about Africa, but I'm curious as to what, if anything, you would do about the Farm Bill. It does tie somewhat into healthcare, prevention, that sort of thing, domestic policy.
The Farm Bill?
The Farm Bill. Right now, it seems like we're doing so much to essentially subsidize production of junk food that I'm curious as to what, if anything, you would change there.
I don't know. You know, I did a little bit of negotiations, international negotiations. You know, we have too many subsidies. I believe in free competition. You know, I would say that I would have a national ban on junk foods, and that involves nutrition. I think the Farm Bill also feeds America. You know, one of my baseball coaches was a guy named Norman Borlaug. He started what is called the Green Revolution. He won a Nobel Peace Prize way before any of you were born.
He was a baseball coach?
Yeah, he was a Little League baseball.
Really?
Yeah.
Massachusetts?
Yeah, and you know, I'm trying to get him to Iowa to do a little campaigning with me, because you know the Green Revolution was developed in Iowa.
Sure.
So I think technology, but the specifics of the Farm Bill, what are the issues? I don't know. I mean, I'm not there. I'm working on my shtick. You know, I don't have it all down. Tell me, what was the answer you would have wanted me to give?
So I wasn't actually thinking of a specific answer, but I'd read an article in the New York Times maybe 2-3 months ago that talked about the relationship of obesity in the U.S. to the way that the Farm Bill incentivizes corn production. Well, who was it? That sounds right. Michael Pollan? Yeah, I think so. And I thought it was a really, really fascinating article. So ever since, I've sort of been wondering what various presidential candidates would do about it.
Well, I'll get you an answer next time I
Send an email. It's great.
I'll send you a Google. No, I mean an email.
We have time for one more. Gosh, they really are.
Adam, where's my guy? I have one staff guy. He falls asleep. Adam, get her, because she.
Okay.
No, you find her. Get her card.
We have time for one more question, and so.
Or you know what? You can do 5 questions, and I'll answer them all.
Okay,
at once.
fine.
Go ahead.
Okay. To come back to Iraq for a second, you mentioned a diplomatic solution between the 3 major parties there, and these parties really don't like each other. So what happens if we pull out before they can come to an agreement, or if the thing breaks down? Wouldn't a set date actually incentivize the strongest of the parties not to come to an agreement and just take it by force, whatever they need, once we pull out?
Okay, that's one. Go ahead. Go ahead.
We'll take a whole bunch of questions, and then.
Okay. I appreciated your comment about the nation being split. It seems to me that's happening in part because of the way political campaigns are run, with so much emphasis on polarizing issues. I'm curious about your opinion as to whether that, if that's true, if it's a permanent change, or if it's something that might become less so at some point, and how that affects your campaign.
Okay.
I just want to know general thoughts and positions on world trade, on the Doha round, and that's sort of a broadening in some ways of the farm subsidy issue, because many people see that as the main thing hindering world trade talks, and on world trade deals versus bilateral trade agreements.
Okay.
The follow-up, I'll be visiting your fine state this July, and I was just curious, as a tourist, what 1 or 2 events or places in Santa Fe you would recommend.
There we go. I think that makes it an official government trip now. Okay. Last question, and then we'll let you give some answers.
Hello. I was curious about your position on nuclear energy and how you saw us developing energy independence in 10 years without it.
Okay.
Or with it, you just hadn't mentioned it as part of
I understand.
Okay.
All right, Iraq pullout. My plan is not a guarantee of success. My plan, I believe, can build a framework that gives Iraq, I believe, a fair chance of survival. It's called diplomacy. It's called withdrawing with honor and diplomacy and a plan, and international engagement, international leadership. The U.S. saying, hey, you know, we're pulling out. We got to find a way collectively. I would still use American air power. I would still deploy some forces of ours out of Iraq, in Bahrain and Kuwait, where we have bases. I would still put some in Afghanistan in case there's a direct threat of some kind. So my pullout from Iraq is total, but it doesn't involve a pullout from the region. And the answer is this. Those military experts that say that to you, the administration experts that say to you, they're the ones that got us in this mess. You know, I've been there. I know how to get it done. They say, oh, it's going to cause a civil war. There is a civil war. There is sectarian conflict. You know, so let's try to fix the problem with a decent plan. And you can't do things halfway. You know, there are a lot of politicians, they're going to tell you, all right, energy development and protecting the environment, we can do both. You know what? Sometimes you can't. Sometimes you can't drill in an ecosystem and you sue, and I've done that. You can't drill in Anwar in Alaska. This is a valuable, plenty of other places to drill in a clean and systemic way. On polarizing issue, you know, look, I don't know what I can tell you. I'm not going to get negative, but I suspect I get the nomination and they start getting negative on me. I remember what happened to Senator Kerry. You know, he didn't respond when his brilliant war record was attacked, and it hurt him. So I'm not admitting perfection there. I believe that what the American people want to see, and why, by the way, those ads are very well received, because they're human. You know, that we take things too seriously, and if anything, we're too negative. And I want us to be more positive, to offer solutions instead of just trashing the president. On the World Trade Doha round, I believe that it still has promise. And something just happened that I read in the New York Times 2 days ago, and that is the Democrats in the Congress may have had an agreement on trade agreements, South Korea, Peru, and Colombia, because the Republicans agreed on the Democratic insistence in the trade agreement that there be environmental standards, that there be fair labor standards, collective bargaining, commitment, no slave labor. So maybe one bipartisan issue seems to be, I won't say it's resolved, but it's promising, and that's trade. Events in the state, when are you coming? When are you coming soon?
July.
All right, well, there's a great, on July 4th, there's a great pancake breakfast in the square in Santa Fe. You should go to that. But you know what you should also do? It involves the Native Americans. There are a lot of pueblos. We have a number of Native American pueblos. They celebrate their feast days, their religious days. A lot of them are in July. You should go to a couple. They're colorful, they're fun. They talk about cultures and talk about Native Americans, talk about forgotten people in America that don't get health care, don't get attention. Not your generations way before you were pretty bad to the Indians. And somehow the agreement was, in return, we'll give you your health care and education because we took your land and we stole your traditions. That hasn't happened. That's a broken promise that as president I would try to fix. I don't know how, but I believe it deserves some. Nuclear energy. I'm not a fan. There's a personal reason and there's just policy reasons. One, what I like about nuclear energy, it doesn't emit greenhouse emissions. It doesn't. Secondly, they've gotten a lot cheaper to build. What do I don't like about them? One, we have not resolved the waste issue. In other words, what do you do with the waste of nuclear power plants? Nevada doesn't want it. All the sites that they're supposed to go to, high level, don't want them. So the solution has been, all right, store them in regional areas. This is what I would do. I would say I would have our national labs find a solution, a technological solution to make the waste disappear or evaporate. I believe we can do it. Why can't we do it? We went to the moon, but you know, we're always short-sightedly thinking. The public is still a little worried about the safety issue, you know, of nuclear power plants. So I wouldn't say, all right, I'm anti-nuclear, but I would say I believe the future is not coal, not dirty coal. It's clean coal. The future is not oil and gas. That's going to stay. I'm not going to ban it. Nuclear, I'm not going to ban it. But I think the future is renewable. Great promise in solar, wind, and biomass, and distributed generation, and fuel cells, and batteries. And you can have your SUVs with fuel-efficient engines. And we can invest in biodiesel and biofuels and ethanol and produce a hybrid vehicle 100 miles per gallon. You know what I would do as part of this energy bill? I would say in 4 years, we got to go to 40 miles per gallon, and in 10 years to 50. We got to do it, and we can do it. We have the technology to do it. It's just that our auto companies, oh, you know, we got to build the big Bronco and the public won't buy it. Yes, they will. The public is changing. And this is where I would ask everybody here, you know, in your comfortable world, and I commend you for it, to sacrifice a little bit for the common good. Where's the nuclear person? Let me just ask you. What do you think should be the future of nuclear?
You got to come to the microphone so that people can hear, please.
I entirely agree that as a long-term solution, renewables are the way to go. You had mentioned an Apollo project-like approach where you get rid of, you really minimize the use of non-renewables over the course, or the use of greenhouse gas emitting technologies over the course of the next 10 years. And it seems to me that the cleanest technology that is here and ready to use right now is nuclear. And that's why I thought maybe in the short term you build nuclear plants, and then in the longer term you focus on solar and wind and biomass and all the other exciting technologies that are still sort of gestational to some extent.
Well, if you look at the last energy bill, it passed 2 years ago in the Congress. They gave great preferences to nuclear, to coal, and to oil and gas. I don't think they should have gotten that. I think it's close to $13 billion in subsidies. I think they should compete with the solar. Solar didn't get it. Wind didn't get it. Distributed generation didn't get it. So I just believe in not in an equal playing field. I think the future is renewable because it's going to create jobs. It's high wage. It's clean. Fossil fuels is what's gotten us into this mess. Now, that's the positive side of nuclear. But, you know, I believe you've got to be responsible. That's a good answer, huh?
And I know that a lot of people have been staying long, and I know we've gone over long. I was wondering if you had a brief statement you wanted to say at the end.
Well, yeah, I would. I appreciate this chance. I know I'm a dark horse in this race. Get it? Dark horse. I believe that I don't have the money or the rock star status. But at the same time, I think I'm ready. I'm prepared. I've got the background. I've got the experience. But see, why is this important? It's important because you now live in California. And you suddenly, California, you guys don't follow politics the way those of us here do. But you're important now. Do you know why? Because you're now an early primary. You're a February 5th primary. So politicians like me have often come here, both parties. California is like ATM machines. You're great for fundraising, but your primary wasn't until June, so you don't determine who the next president might be. Now you do. So I think the issues that affect you, California issues, and by the way, you know, I would be a transportation governor. You guys have a traffic problem in this state. And no, but a president should have land use policies, smart growth policies that find ways that Americans can live better. But a president, see, we have a role because there are federal highway fund bills that presidents control. I would promote light rail, bullet trains. I would find ways. I mean, this is the way we are getting around, people going to school, going to work, picking up their kids. I mean, I don't know how in Los Angeles and Nevada this is a huge issue. Miami. I mean, so my point is issues like transportation, like water. We got to find ways to conserve water and transfer water and technologically reuse that technology. Quality of life, pro-growth issues, immigration. I mean, you guys should, I'm surprised that just 3 of the candidates have come out here. You should ask all of them to come and give you their vision and make a judgment, because you're so important. You are right after Iowa, New Hampshire, South Carolina, and Nevada. And you could have several candidates falter in the first 4, but then you could lift up that next candidate. Nobody knows the effect that you will have. Some say that Iowa and New Hampshire are now that much more important because they'll propel such candidates into California. Others say, well, candidates with a lot of money that can advertise are the ones that are going to do better. I don't know the answer to that because it's the first time it's ever happened. Anyway, thank you for listening, and I appreciate all of you, and maybe you can think of voting for me. Thank you.